Perfect. Hit record.
All right, here we go. We are live. Jensen Huffman on episode 1 of Get Better Every Day with Snapper. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Let's see if we can come up with
Absolutely.
something that's entertaining, fun, and people can take something away from it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of fun being the first of the first.
Yeah. So, Jensen, how do we know each other? We went to school together, right?
Yep. Lake Ridge High School, class of 96.
Man, it's a long time ago. But
It was.
yeah, so we didn't really orbit in the same circles in high school, but kind of reconnected at what was it, the 20-year reunion? No, what is it?
Yeah, it probably was. No, we graduated in 96. It could have been. What was that, like 5 years ago?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's about
yeah,
20 years. That's terrifying.
reconnected. Yeah, and you brought Jax, your
Yeah,
primary dog, right?
yeah.
And that was a connection that clicked with me, and I was very impressed with the discipline that your pup had,
Okay.
and kind of developed our relationship from there. So very impressive with what I saw the very first time we spent time at that reunion, with how that dog's demeanor was, and
Yeah.
management of that whole thing. So with that in
He's a cool
life,
dog.
yeah, tell me about how you got from high school at Lake Ridge in 96 to developing this enterprise that is dog training and creating epic dogs.
Yeah. So, man, 96 is so long ago. After school, or after high school, chased a mutual friend of ours, Jenny, down to Oregon State. And she was my girlfriend at the time, fantastic human being. And so chased her down to Oregon State, and found, strangely enough, my way into chemical engineering. It was one of those, like, try chemistry or try psychology. That was kind of boring. Tried chemistry, really liked it. Looked up at a bulletin board in one of the school departments, and saw that chemical engineers make $45,000 a year starting, where chemistry majors make 23,000. And so I switched my major into chemical engineering, not knowing a whole hell of a lot about it. While I was down there, I was teaching, to kind of supplement my school and help put myself through school. I was teaching deep technical diving with a group down there, and doing some commercial diving stuff. And we were doing a recovery dive where we saw a canine team looking for a cadaver on the canal bank up in Hoodsport, where we were looking for the individuals underneath the water. And bobbing up and down on the surface, I looked over at my dive master, the guy who was working with me, and I'm like, man, I want to do that. That looks awesome. We tracked down that canine handler, and that individual who is bobbing up and down next to me. His name's Victor, still one of my all-time very best friends. We both joined Search One Canine Detection, which was a volunteer search and rescue group out of Tualatin, Oregon at the time. And we both got our very first dogs, started training those dogs, certifying those dogs for general wilderness air scent search and rescue. And that's kind of where the whole process started. Graduating was strange back in the early 2000s. It was right after 9/11. Not a whole lot of jobs around. And so looked at a whole bunch of different things, and dabbled in a whole bunch of different things, from engineering to business to manufacturing. And one of the things that I kind of found myself wrapped up in was a small contract group that was operating out of southern Texas, and was doing, basically contract border work. So U.S. Border Patrol, Homeland Security, that type of thing. And I joined that team, and they had dogs, and for some time I was running dogs outside of Juarez and El Paso. Went to their handler school, went to spent some time learning how to be a multi-purpose canine handler, and did that off and on, you know, as kind of contractors kind of do, as I
Yeah.
picked up other jobs and then came back and then did that some more and then tried another job. And
Yeah.
it was a strange period in my life, honestly. You know, my early 20s, running around with my hair on fire, had some ridiculous car that you know, I shouldn't have ever had, that, you know, was pumping 500 horsepower, you know, like
Sounds
screaming.
fun.
It was
But that was
fun.
the era where you learned how to train dogs and where you kind of developed
Absolutely.
those skills, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Um, and then yeah, I joined another team that did counter poaching work around the world. Train dogs for them, train handlers for them. Again, kind of bouncing back and forth between the real world stuff and some of this contract stuff. And man, this is just where my passions lie. Whenever I was working with dogs, I was happy. Whenever I was working with humans, I was less happy.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Hey, it makes sense.
yeah.
Um, so what's the next step where you kind of turned that passion that you got into, and I want to ask a little bit later about,
Yeah.
you know, the range of skills that you work with the dogs, the techniques and procedures, the range of tasks, if you will, that your dog handling kind of saw. But
Yeah.
right now, let's get into how you went to the next step and created a business out of the passion of dog handling.
Yeah. So it was actually right about the time that I was meeting you for a second time at that class reunion, where I was sort of at an all-time low in my life. Um, I had been struggling through a at that point probably a 2.5 year long divorce, custody battle for my kids. I had a business prior to that that, because of my lack of attention, you know, based on the overwhelming sort of weight of a divorce and that kind of thing, wasn't getting the attention that it needed. So it was beginning to fail. Um, I had begun dating, and you know, I financially, I was in a single bedroom apartment. I was fighting tooth and nail to have my kids 50% of the time,
Yeah.
and I was paying out the nose in everything from spousal support, child support, attorney fees. My kids were on pallets, literally pallets that had a single mattress that I would turn from their beds in the living room into a couch, you
Yeah.
know, during the daytime.
Yeah.
Um, man, you know, we go through these fluctuations in life, and that was no question, you know, kind of a really deep low. And at that time, I had purchased Jax, right? Jax is like you said, he's now 6 years old, Belgian Malinois. And I was just sort of pouring everything that I had into him. He was kind of my one source of, outside of my kids, my one source of, you know, joy that
Yeah.
I was having at that point. And honestly, I wanted to be able to take a girl out. Like, that's really where I was. I mean, you know, I was eating ramen and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I was at a Starbucks of all things, trying desperately to maintain my existing business at the time. And somebody came up, kind of like you, and said, "Wow, your dog is so well behaved. I wish that my dog could be like that." I was like, "Oh yeah, you know, I'd be happy to teach you how." And they're like, "Well, what would you charge for dog training?" And I'm like, I don't know, uh, $40 an hour." and and she's like, "Done."
Dude.
And so yeah, you know, month number one, you know, I grossed a grand total of, I think, I think I sold her a 10 session package for $400. Whoop, hello, hey, hey,
That's
my,
not Jax.
you know, this is definitely not Jax, but he's coming over to say hello. All right, Walter.
Oh, that's great. Perfect
Um,
timing,
Perfect
little
timing.
guy.
But yeah, I mean, that's truly, it started in a Starbucks with somebody saying, "Can you make my dog do that?"
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, I sort of saw an opportunity, and an opportunity to do something that I absolutely love to do. And It created an opportunity for me to get back into some of that contract work with the counter poaching team. It gave me a tremendous amount of purpose, and then and so kind of the last 6 years has been nothing but growth from that point.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So here's let's do a little plug to your website is www.huffmancanine.com,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
And so you have that website that can push anybody that's interested into your business and participate, right?
Yeah. Huffman Canine is our consumer dog training business. We
Okay.
work with everybody from individuals who just have pets with really reactive behaviors to law enforcement and high level detection and working dogs, tracking dogs, working dogs, search and rescue dogs, law enforcement dogs. So we really sort of span the entire gambit. And then while we're throwing plugs out, my other business that I own with my partner, David Price, is called Charon Canine Solutions, and
Okay.
it's www.charoncanine.com, and that's for the contract work.
Okay.
We do explosive ordnance detection, firearms detection, narcotics and contraband detection, as well as tracking. And then we also provide security services, executive protection, asset protection, private and personal protection type services,
Okay.
with a specialty around canine.
Awesome. So that's a great segue into kind of the setup that I gave you on. I want to hear a little bit about some of the specifics of how the dogs use techniques and procedures for specific tasks. And you just mentioned a whole bunch of different
Mhm.
types of jobs that canines work with. So give me maybe an example of a personal protection type of thing, and then maybe a drug detection that's not necessarily the border, if that's,
Mhm.
I think people have
Yeah.
a good picture of the news, a dog sniffing a car or something for a border thing. Maybe there's a different example out there that would be interesting to folks.
Yeah, the detections. So I always tell people, professional canines are either a force multiplier or detection asset. Like that's really what they do in a very short sentence. Force multiplier or detection asset. Their olfactory system is so incredibly uh, precise and sensitive, that there's really nothing that we have that is man-made that can even begin to approach a canine's ability to seek out and identify and discriminate amongst all of the different odors that might be out there. So, as an example, Charon currently carries a contract where we're working with a group called Cargo Screening Canine. They are a business that works with airports, shipping companies, in order to basically scan cargo for everything from explosives to narcotics, various types of contraband, before they get shipped out. And one of the locations that we're at right now, really interesting business. They are a domestic address for international clients, so that US based companies feel safe and secure shipping to an address, say over in Tualatin, Oregon. They consolidate all of those shipments together, and then will ship that at their risk and their liability to these very risky addresses internationally. So, for example, if you have an address in Afghanistan or Somalia or Pakistan or something
Yeah.
like that, you might not be able to get a domestic shipment over there from a company like REI.
Okay.
And so what they do is they sort of take on that risk. Well, they also take on risk for, or they also take on shipments from like eBay and those kind of things. So what comes in? Well, they're not liable for that, but what goes out, they are.
Okay.
And so they have to make sure that, for example, narcotics are illegal to ship internationally. That those packages don't contain any of that stuff.
Yeah. So then the dogs in that uh, process, you'd probably have multiple dogs, right? That would be trained for specific things. There's one
Yep.
for explosives, there's one for narcotics, there's one for weapons or whatever, right? It's a specific training process
Yep.
for each thing you're looking for.
Yeah, very similar process. We're just imprinting on different odors.
Okay.
So, for example, Jax is a explosive ordnance and firearms detection dog. Okay,
Okay.
so from an explosive ordnance standpoint, he's imprinted on Simtex, RDX, TNT, dynamite, TATP, black powder, smokeless powder, your various nitrates, ammonium,
Yeah.
potassium nitrates. The list kind of goes on within that. I think there's probably 12 different explosive odors that he's been imprinted on. And it's really easy then to bridge over to firearms, right? Because
Yeah.
smokeless powder
Yep.
and firearms, right? They
Yeah.
really kind of go hand in hand.
Okay. That makes sense.
Now we don't mix, like I would never imprint him on narcotics, right? Because if he hits on something, I have to treat that as an explosive, right? So if he hits on a gram of heroin, I don't want to clear the entire building and city block
Yeah.
because of a gram of heroin or
Yeah.
something like that.
That
So I
man,
have
that we could talk
yeah.
for freaking
Oh yeah,
hours
we can
on.
go forever on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Anyway,
pretty
so
neat stuff.
tell me about maybe a technique or personal defense, something about how a training of a dog would differ versus imprinting a scent to a personal defense type of a role.
Yeah, so first off, I think you need to look at genetics, right? Not all dogs have the genetics that are capable of using aggression in order to manage and mitigate threats, right? And that's really what protection is all about, right? Protection is a dog identifies a threat to somebody that he or she is charged with taking care of, and they feel confident and comfortable in standing in the way of that threat, and they use aggression in order to basically solve that problem. Like we
Yeah.
basically teach them that using their teeth can solve problems.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we have to build in a tremendous amount of obedience and stability into those dogs,
Right.
so that we're not weaponizing an animal that is thoughtful, emotional. They are actively making decisions, and we don't want to weaponize a dog that is unpredictable, reactive, unstable. And so we have to do a tremendous amount of stability work as well as the actual aggression and protection work. But yeah, essentially, I mean, that's what we're doing is we're building a dog that is comfortable in working under immense amounts of stress, physical, emotional, verbal pressure. And what we're teaching them is that the harder they fight, the harder they punch in, the harder they bite, they win.
Yeah.
Okay. So with a puppy, we start with, a little piece of burlap,
Yeah.
and we're loving on them, and we're telling them what a good boy they are and what a good girl they are. And we might put a little bit of pressure just by lifting them up off the ground. And then we set them down when they punch into that bite a little harder. Right. So that's the pressure that we're putting them under. That develops over the course of months and even years into a dog that and I can share some videos and that kind of thing, but into a dog that is engaged in a real and active fight with an adult human being. And remember, an adult, how much do you weigh, Vince? What,
I'm about
225?
240 right now.
240? Yeah, I
Yeah.
was giving you the benefit of the doubt there. But here's a 240-pound man, right?
Yeah.
You're pretty impressive to just about anybody that you might walk up to. So building a dog that is 65 pounds, who has that mental perspective of, I don't care how big you are, I don't care how heavy you are, provided I fight harder, bite deeper, thrash harder, I will win that fight. Like there is no doubt in that dog's head that they will win every single time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, so that's kind of the personal protection side,
Yeah.
but honestly, the training angle on it is very, very similar. Whether we're training tracking dogs, detection dogs, protection dogs, apprehension dogs, those type of things.
Yeah, that was my next question. You segued right into it. Would you say that the training load for a dog trainer would be higher for a personal protection dog versus imprinting a scent for a detection dog? Just because you have to have those safeguards and that amount of control as the handler.
I mean, when we start to talk about specialties, so like Jax is what we would call a multi-purpose canine, as opposed to a dual purpose canine. A single purpose canine might just be a detection dog, might just be a patrol dog, might just be a protection dog, might just be a tracking dog or general air scent dog for search and rescue, right?
Okay.
Single purpose, like that's what they do.
Yep.
Dual purpose is like, say, a law enforcement patrol dog that has all of the apprehension training, but is also certified on their ability to detect and alert on the presence of narcotic odors,
Yeah.
for example, right? So when you look at canine officers or canine handlers, generally their departments will have specific expectations from a training standpoint. I know a lot of the local law enforcement company or groups up here have the expectation that for a dual purpose canine, those handlers and those canines are engaging in at least 16 hours per month per discipline of training, right? Like, so they have the apprehension training 16
Yeah.
hours a month, or at least patrol based stuff, and then they have at least 16 hours on dope. Jax would be considered multi-purpose because he's also a very, very talented tracking dog.
Yeah.
So he's explosive ordnance, he's tracking, he's one of the very best apprehension dogs I've ever worked with in my life. And he really is sort of one of those like outrageously special dogs.
That's awesome. Hey, I
And
want
yeah,
to try to.
we're training all the time.
I want to try to
we'll keep
push.
going.
I can't believe how fast time's flying here. This is awesome. All right, so I want to get into our main theme here. That is accountability. I want the purpose of this podcast is for me to try to find things in life that will make people's experience better. So I think one of the basic tenets, one of the foundational principles of being good at life is maintaining accountability personally and through those for those people that are within your sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And as a business owner, a father, a husband, citizen, those or boyfriend, I'm not sure. You married? You are
I
married.
am married.
You're remarried. That's
I'm
right.
married, happily married.
Yes, we didn't quite get through that whole story, so I just want to make sure. Yes, happily remarried.
Yep.
What is your perspective from those points of view on just accountability and personal responsibility? I wonder what if those have created impact in your life, those concepts, or just kind of how you approach that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Okay, so in training handlers, in training owners, in training at Huffman Canine, for example, we don't train dogs, we train owners.
Right.
And it's kind of this idea of you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Yeah, I can take your dog and I can train your dog, but I mean, all I'm doing is giving you back a trained dog that, provided you don't hold that dog accountable, all of the stuff that I put into that dog is going to backslide, right?
Yeah.
Like, skills are perishable.
Yep.
And if they don't work with the dog, if they don't know how to work with the dog, all the money that they spent with me training their dog goes to waste, right? So when I'm working with the people, because that's my job. My job is not to train dogs. My job is to train people how to train dogs. One of the things that I say is perfect accountability lends itself to perfect obedience. Okay. Now, I mean, we're kind of segueing a little bit into the world of dogs, right?
Yeah.
In a dog, I need obedience, right? If I say come, I need that dog to come back. If I say wait, I need that dog to wait. If I'm working with an explosive ordnance detection dog, you better believe I need perfect obedience, because one small step turns everybody into pink mist, right?
Yep.
We don't want that. So perfect accountability lends itself to perfect obedience. Now, let me give you sort of a human example of that. Right down the street.
Let's pause 1 second. I got it.
Sure.
If this system cuts us off, I'm going to re-attack with a new link, and we'll start our
Yeah, no worries.
video over. Okay.
Okay. All
we
right.
might have a time limit kicking us off in a second.
Oh, seriously? Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how this Zoom is doing on time limits these days. It may have changed, so we'll just be aware of it.
Okay, sounds good. So to kind of come back, perfect accountability lends itself to perfect obedience. Let me give you sort of a human example of what that looks like. Right outside, I drive down a road called Barlow Road in Canby. Okay, I take it to my home and away from my home every single day.
Right.
The speed limit on Barlow is 55 miles an hour. I drive 63. Now, I fully acknowledge that every single time I drive out on that road, I break the law. Okay, I am disobedient to the legislation that has been put forth. I am fully competent in my ability to drive my car 55, and yet I make a choice to drive 63.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, why do I choose to drive 63 instead of, say, 68? Because the individuals who have authority over me, which is our law enforcement officers here in Canby, generally will hold us accountable to speed about 9 to 11 miles an hour over the speed limit. Okay. So I am obedient to the level of accountability to which I'm held, and the rule doesn't make any difference at all to me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well put. I love it.
So that's something that I tell my students all the time. I'm like, hey, if you asked your dog to sit, your dog lied down. Okay, are you going to hold your dog accountable to that, or are you okay with your dog lying down when you actually told it to sit? Because when I send my kids to school, if the teacher says, hey, please sit in your chair, I expect them to stay seated in their chair rather than sliding under the desk and taking a nap, right? So, you have to kind of decide. And remember that accountability doesn't just apply to that one facet or that one vertical of, say, sitting or lying down. Your lack of accountability over that dog is going to creep into everything else. When you call him, he may come back 9 times out of 10, not 10 out of 10. He may come back halfway and then get sidetracked, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the closer we can get to perfect accountability, the closer we can get to perfect obedience. Well, I'm also a father.
Yeah. Here's the bread and butter. This is the meat and potatoes for this podcast, man.
So I'm a father. Now, there's a difference between me working with my kids and working with dogs. With my dogs, I am building to them to be obedient throughout the course of their lifespan. With my kids, I am teaching them to think critically and to be disobedient when things don't make sense. There's a massive difference between those two, right?
Yeah.
And, you and I talked about some of the military stuff when we sat down. And to this day, I mean, my dad said a lot of really wise things to me, but he said, Jensen, here, and he's a military guy, right?
Yeah.
Retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, flew 130s in Vietnam, all the way through until he retired. He retired twice, I think, one from the reserves and one from active duty. And he said, as I was looking at potentially going to the Air Force Academy, chasing my buddy Vince over there, he said, and it stuck with me. He said, I raised you to think critically. There will be a point in your military career where you are given the command to get into the proverbial hole. Now, remember, this is a Vietnam era guy. Right?
Yeah.
What were people doing at that point? Well, they took a pistol and they jumped into a fucking hole. And when they went into that hole, there was a damn good chance that they weren't going to come out.
Yeah.
And he said, you're going to turn around and you're going to look at that superior officer and you're probably going to say, based on how I trained you, that's a really dumb fucking idea.
Yeah.
Right? And he said, when you do that, you're going to be in deep shit. And I don't know if you want to be in deep shit. I want you to think really critically on whether or not this is the appropriate course for your life. Okay. Now that is not meant to, badmouth in any way. I think one of my biggest regrets is that I did not follow a path of service in the military, right? I mean, I still look back on that and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I did the right thing there. But you know, it was something that really stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And what I've come to realize now is actually, you know, now that I have a number of individuals who are part of the SOF community and that kind of thing, is really the guys who were critical thinkers and the ones who are willing to still be obedient and still follow orders, but vocalize their opinion on, you know what, I think that's actually a really stupid idea. Those were the ones that actually got really, really high up.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where, but okay, I feel like I'm segueing here.
We're
There's
doing fine. I mean, let's see,
it's
has
it
training
yeah,
the
go ahead.
dogs shaped your ideas on how to be good at life as a human? And we're kind of approaching that, talking about the accountability part and the stories about having to be discerning and think critically. So
Mhm.
I think we're right there. We're still on the right topic. You're still in the right place.
I think we are. You know, so fatherhood, right? I hold my kids accountable to morality. I hold my kids accountable to sort of our family mission of protecting those who can't protect themselves. I hold my kids accountable to critical thinking. Um, I won't settle for short-sighted and non-thoughtful decisions, right?
Like a quick
Um,
reaction, emotional response to something. You got to
right.
think through it, right?
Yep. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now, why do you want to go do that?
Yeah.
Like, why? What's the driving factor in that? Like, let's think critically around this to really evaluate what is the very best decision. Because unfortunately, in life, it's not always a sit and you have to sit type, you know, kind of decision
Yeah.
process, right?
So what are the
It's a
ages of
whole
your
lot of
kids?
gray area. 13 and 15.
Okay, 13 and 15. So what is a specific example or technique where you jumped in and gave some direction on how that 13-year-old mentality uses critical thinking? Have you had to provide, hey, when you see this on the news, you have to think about it this way? Is there something like an example that you can kind of think
So
about?
I'll tell you a story, and it's about my son Aiden. He was in seventh grade, and he came in. I was barbecuing in our barbecue room here, and he came out and he said, "Dad, I really need to talk to you." And I mean, this might choke me up.
Okay.
And I'm like, and I could see the seriousness in him, right? I could see this like insanely heavy weight on his shoulders. And he said, Dad, I know that this is something that you will help me with. And he said, and he showed me his phone, and it was a text stream with another a kid at their school. And the kid at the school was laughing, saying, "Yeah, so and so on the bus said that he was going to bring a gun to school on the last day of school." And this is middle school, right? This is middle school in Wilsonville, um, very upscale kind of area.
Yeah.
And he said, "Dad, I know this kid, and I don't know if he's joking, right?" And and so of course I drop everything, right? And we immediately, you know, go sit out on the front porch and on speakerphone, you know, and I work with a lot of law enforcement personnel, and I reach out to Wilsonville PD and a handler that I know with Clackamas County Sheriff Office. And I said, "Hey, my son's on the phone, and he needs to talk to you guys." And so he talked to the officer. They launched an investigation, um, and it turned out to be credible. And they went into, you know, the home, and they found the father's gun that had been taken out of the father's nightstand and shoved between the mattresses. And you know, I mean, like it kills me how proud I am of
Yeah.
him, you know, because that's when I talk about accountability, you know, there's also this sense of pride. I can't think of a specific moment where I actually held my son accountable to critical thought. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Okay.
But I can absolutely think of the moment where my son took all of the
You observed the
lessons,
fruits of your labor. It was
the
like,
fruits of the labor,
yeah,
and I mean, it just blew me away. And I was like, you know, and we talked so much about it with my other son, who's 2 years younger than him. He was still in elementary school at that time. About like, you know, this is what our family is all about. This is what it means to be accountable. It means that, you know, I know that you were worried about backlash from the kids if you know, were the snitch or whatever, but you know, the self-sacrifice to say, look, I don't know what's going to happen to me, but I can't let this happen to other human beings.
yeah,
That's accountability to me,
yeah,
right?
yep,
And obedience to morality and obedience to ethics and obedience to honor and the obedience to self-sacrifice. That's accountability to
yeah.
me, you know.
Awesome. That's
um
great stuff, man. I don't want to keep this going too long. We've got,
yeah,
we're sitting at 40 minutes plus,
yeah.
and my goal was to be 40 or less. Let's see here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Man, that is a great lesson. I love it that, you know, the training of your kids has borne the fruit of holding others accountable, seeing something
Yeah,
that's wrong and saying something, and it's not being a snitch, it's not being petty on little stuff. That was something I think anyone would argue is rises to the level of needing to be brought up and discussed. And there's
yeah,
some things that people bring up that aren't necessarily rising to that level in today's
yep.
society, but that's one that is a prime example of what is right.
And
Um,
I'll say one more thing in regards to this, which I
sure.
think for me kind of brings it to completion. Not once since then has he ever brought it up. He's never brought it up to a friend. He's never bragged about it in front of his brother, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there was no sort of like, look at me. Like I feel like I'm doing that for him. Like I'm his dad. I feel that fucking proud of him. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But it really was like that. That's I think when it's like I'm raising a man, when I'm, you know, the accountability piece is he simply did it because it was right.
Yeah.
And it didn't have anything to do with him looking better. It didn't have anything to do with him looking like a hero. Like, I feel like that's what so much of everybody is about right now.
Yeah.
They're doing things to look better, you know, in the eyes of everyone else. And um, I mean, it was just sort of the epitome of what it means to me to be healthy and masculine and self accountable and doing things just simply because it's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
right? An accountability to morality,
That's awesome.
um, which, you know, for me just sort of wraps it all together with it.
Yeah. That's proud papa talking right there.
Proud, I am. I couldn't be more proud. So
A couple quick like shotgun questions. Okay.
yeah, yep.
What have you found brings you the most joy in life? I think I
My
have a
kids,
clue. You
my
said
kids,
your kids. Yep.
yep, my kids and my wife, my family.
Yeah.
Yep,
Awesome. I thought that would be what you came up with after where we got to
yep,
in the conversation at this point.
yep.
Um, okay. Any good jokes?
Oh shit. I don't know.
Any good one-liners?
Dude, I got all the dad jokes.
Perfect.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
But see, they're not jokes unless you actually have context behind them.
Yeah.
Man, way to throw me on the spot. I don't have one right off the bat, but
Okay.
I'll think about it. I'll think about it.
All right. Last question. Is there anything that you would go back and tell your 20-year-old self if you could
Hmm.
in order to be a better man?
probably slow down. Yeah, think.
Yeah,
Slow down and think, I
that could
think.
apply to dozens of situations in my life.
Yeah, totally, right? Probably just slow down and think. Um,
That's good.
I wish I could go back and say, hey, figure out your boundaries. But the truth is, it's life is what develops the boundaries, the healthy boundaries that we have. I don't think I could go back, and it's like I can't put my 15-year-old and say, hey, have really good boundaries with your relationships.
Yeah.
You know,
He's like, what?
yeah,
And then
you
what's
know,
so difficult about it also is if I was at 16, if the
yeah.
technology and the
Oh yeah,
constantly having an online presence was available then, I think probably most of our generation, if they were plugged into this, would probably be in jail or canceled or crushed or be unhireable because of the things that we did in
oh yeah,
1996 are now absolutely not acceptable online. So,
absolutely, yeah, yeah. Uh,
yeah,
I don't know how the kids are doing it right now. I
yeah,
think it's yeah, it's really, really hard for, I think it's even hard for adults,
yeah.
there are absolutely times where my kids hold me accountable, and they're like, Dad, get off your phone. And I'm like, shit, you're right. I need to get off my phone. You're
Time to be
absolutely right.
present in the moment. Be here with us.
Yep,
That's good. Yeah.
totally. It's hard for us 45-year-olds.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, Jensen. Hey, it's been a pleasure. Like I
Well,
said,
thank you.
we could
Thank you for
probably
having me,
talk
man.
another 2 hours on this stuff. I want to
Oh
keep it
yeah.
to 45 minutes. So
Okay.
if we go to round two down the road, if I can get this thing off the ground and moving, then so be it. I look forward to it.
I love it, man. Good job. I love what you're doing, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help. All right.
All right.